And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw everyone to myself. And these words come from today's gospel reading. My friends, years ago, I gave a Lenten presentation on the history and theology of the crucifix. I offered it to various parishes in the area where I served. And at one presentation at a sister parish, a wonderful elderly couple attended. They were a couple who were quite successful in business, deeply devotional, and who in their retirement enjoyed making wonderful contributions to the wider community, real philanthropists. However, the wife in this relationship, who had a heart as good as anyone you would ever meet, had acquired towards the end of her life a bit of an affect in her speech, almost if she were an English countessa. And as we moved during a break from the place of presentation to a place where refreshments were being served, the couple passed by, and the wife touched my arm and said loudly, "Father, to me, the whole of the world is my crucifix." And as she passed, her husband leant towards me and whispered into my ear, "Yes, Father, and she is my cross." My friends, today we hear once again the fundamental theology that lies at the heart of the gospel message. Whether it be the narrative theology of the synoptic gospels or the introspective theology of the New Testament epistles, or as in today's declarative reading from St. John's Gospel, the great mystery that underlies all our sacramental and moral life, the mystery of the cross, the mystery of dying to self and living for God. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains just a grain of wheat. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. It's a difficult principle to accept. Even those among us who readily take upon ourselves the Lenten discipline of fasting and abstaining and almsgiving, who readily make sacrifice for others, all of us have difficulty bearing that personal burden that demands of an individual a death to self. Who in this life doesn't have a cross to bear? But how often do we ask ourselves the question, why is God doing this to me? Why do I have to carry this burden? Why this cross? And the answer given to us from the Christ who hangs upon the cross is ever the same. This is the pathroad of salvation for you. It's like the good nuns used to say to their students in the old sister school, offer it up. But the daily bearing of the cross is the ultimate spiritual challenge. It is that painful moment when the Lord asks us to die to self, to accept a burden that seems beyond us, that often seems like more than we can possibly bear. However, the words of Thomas à Kempis in his imitation of Christ come readily to mind. In the cross is salvation. In the cross is life. In the cross is protection from enemies. In the cross is infusion of heavenly sweetness. In the cross is the strength of mind. In the cross is joy of spirit. In the cross is the height of virtue. In the cross is the perfection of sanctity. There is no health of soul, nor hope of everlasting life, save in the cross of Christ. Go where you will, seek what you will, and you will not find a higher way above, nor a surer way below, than in the royal road of the Holy Cross. At the heart of our lives, at the heart of true discipleship, is the mystery of the cross. When St. Patrick began his mission to Ireland, the whole of the island was dominated by Druidism. That ancient paganism was woven into the very fabric of Celtic life. How was Patrick to convert the island to whom Christianity seemed so foreign? What Patrick did was to look from within this paganistic thinking and identify the elements that harmonized with Christianity. And then he took the philosophy down to the Shannon and the Liffey rivers and baptized it. The whole understanding of the triune nature of God and the principle of the incarnation, which were foundational to his preaching, were readily understood by the people, and in particular, the mystery of the cross. By the time of Patrick's death and burial on March 17th of 461 at Downpatrick, the entire island had been converted. The mystery they experienced in their lives harmonized beautifully with the preaching of the gospel. And at the heart of that preaching was the mystery of the cross. St. Bridget, the abbot of the great monastery at Kildare, was once called to the bedside of a dying pagan chieftain. Her Her neighbors, knowing the holiness of the saint, hoped that she might be able to give him some comfort. And when she arrived, the chieftain was literally raving. Rather than attempting to calm him down, Bridget sat down at his bedside and began taking rushes from the floor that had been strewn there for cleanliness and warmth, and began fashioning out of them the image of a cross. The sick man, fascinated by her work, began to calm down and finally asked her what she was doing. Bridget, using the image she had fashioned, began to explain the mystery of the cross. And as she talked, the delirium quieted in the man. His growing interest caused him to ask her to be received into the faith. He was baptized and confirmed and communicated on his deathbed. His first communion was his viaticum, his last rite. And since that time, the image of St. Bridget's cross has hung in believing homes in Ireland, a sign of the power this image has of God's reconciling love. Again, the heart of it was the mystery of the cross. Who doesn't have a cross to bear? Who doesn't shepherd a burden for oneself, for one's family member, for a friend? Who doesn't have to struggle with an illness or a condition that afflicts one's soul more than one's body? The great invitation to those who bear any burden is to offer it to God with the crucified Lord, who alone has the power to help us understand and bear the burden. When I was a seminarian, I was assigned in pastoral ministry to one of the critical care units at St. John of God Hospital in the Brookline section of Boston. There was a woman on that floor whom I visited regularly, and who was dying of an undiagnosed illness. We later came to know the disease as AIDS. She had lived on the streets of Boston, earning her living by selling herself. And whenever I visited her, she always made it clear that she believed her illness was God's judgment upon her life, that she was being punished by God. Uncomfortable with her perspective, I attempted one day to correct her thinking about God. She, in turn, corrected me. She made it clear that she was comforted by God's punishment. It was a cross that he laid upon her shoulder to draw her closer to himself. If God was interested enough to send this terrible disease into her life, she said, in order to burn away the burden of her sin, it meant that he had enough interest in her to reveal his love for her in his painful moment of her life. Once again, the mystery of the cross was revealed in her life, as it continues to be revealed in ours. Know for certain you must live a dying life. The more you die to self, the more you live for God. The words of Thomas à Kempis continue to haunt us in this latter part of the Lenten season. Really, it's easy to fast. It's easy to abstain. It's easy to give alms. But dying to self, bearing a cross, that comes at a price. But the gift in return is the only gift that really matters, the only gift that endures: friendship with Christ. Bear the cross willingly, and it will bring you to your desired end. And that's the promise. And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all to myself.